Well, hello, hello. So, let's start out again, just the first 15 minutes, kind of talking about the book and the chapters you read. So what did you think of those two, was it 2 or 3 chapters we had? 2. Chapter 6, or 3, 6, 7, and 8.
16.
Yeah.
Larry was a character.
Yes, he is.
They knew each other well.
Yes. Larry is like a bull in a china shop. Yes. Yes. And he's a little antagonistic there, right? Just telling, not letting Goddard be at peace, but just kind of like egging him on. Like, I know you're going to get involved. I know you're going to do something. I'm even going to place a bet. So, yeah, Larry's an interesting character.
And I thought that was interesting that Goddard didn't get mad when it turned out that Larry was right. I mean, it was like, I wouldn't even want to admit he had it right.
Yeah, well, I will say it, and that was reflective of, I would say when I found out that the people that were poured into my life, that I baked into that Larry character, I'm not typically somebody that likes to admit I'm wrong, but was happy to at that time because I was facing some difficult things where I didn't know what my future looked like. I didn't know what the next phase for me was. And so when all these people were pouring into my life saying, you're not done yet, there's more to do, that's one time I was very glad I was wrong because I thought I had nothing left to give. So, but yeah, same with Goddard. He was grateful to be wrong in that instance. What you guys think of the dog story?
That was cute.
So obviously when they went out to get pizza, they had a new little friend tag along, and that dog. So that dog, we wrote that part in because we personally had a little white dog. He was a Maltipoo. His name was Charlie. Meant the world to us, me. He was the only other male in the house, so him and I got a chance to bond.
Over pizza.
Over pizza. And pizza was his favorite food. Like anytime I made pizza, that dog lost his mind. As a matter of fact, I remember one time where the girls were all gone and it was Charlie's birthday, and I am a huge fan of pizza. I could eat pizza for every meal. So I made myself a pizza and I made him a little personal pizza, and we just sat there all night and ate pizzas and watched guy movies. Yeah, so Charlie, the character in there was representative of Charlie and how important he was to us. But it's more fun. I'll let Stacie tell the story of why the dog was so much a part of that chapter that you read, and the story of how crazy
my mom was.
Yeah,
dogs,
with
yeah.
dogs,
So yeah, obviously Sydney was the owner, and you could tell that she was just obsessed with that dog. So my mom, Sydney, loved every animal she had more than life itself. My parents even got married because of a dog. So my parents, my parents are actually standing next to each other in their kindergarten picture. So 5 years old, they're standing next to each other. It's actually in their bedroom. And so my parents were friends through high school, college, just random friends. And when they both came back from college, they were going out bowling. And my dad came and picked up my mom, and she was crying. And he was like, what's wrong? And she said, my parents just sold our house. They're moving to an apartment or townhouse. And the townhouse does not allow big dogs. It was a big border collie that they had, and that was my mom's dog. And my dad, who he always is a problem solver, fixer, doesn't like anyone to be, in distress or hurt. He goes, Sid, we'll figure it out. He goes, I'll marry you if I have to find a house for this dog. And she looked at him, she goes, okay. Kid you not. They got married not that far after that, and they bought a house, and the dog was their prized possession. And then every dog after that, my dad said when he comes back in life, he wants to be one of my mom's dogs because she loved the dogs more than life itself. I mean, my mom has passed, and her best friend dog, Riley, was a bulldog that we all could not stand. And this dog was just a bulldog. It slobbered, it was gross. She loved that dog, and when that dog passed away about 8 months before my mom, the only thing she requested, she goes, when I get buried, I want Riley with me. So could you not, Riley's ashes are buried with my mom, and so they are together forever. So dogs and my mom had something very special, so we decided to kind of put that story in with our dog, and then the connection of my parents on why they got married, because of their dog named Tiny. Yeah.
Oh, that's cute.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, oh, that's a good one.
So
what
that
else?
was a fun chapter.
What else did you find out? What else did we learn in these chapters?
I think the main thing I learned is that Goddard really wasn't done.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, he thought he was. And then once he found out he wasn't, he was as enthusiastic as he had ever been as a younger man.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, it's that's a great observation. It's I think we all have felt that, right? I mean, we've all felt at some point that, okay, we have nothing more to give, we're just done, but then somebody or something comes into our life and challenges us. In this story, it was our crazy friend Larry that came in and challenged Goddard, and just he kind of lit that spark a little bit. The opportunity was there.
He poked the bear.
He did. He poked the bear. Well said. And but then, you know, and what we're hopeful, everybody who reads our book is that we all have passions in our life, and it's good to revisit those passions because it could rekindle a spark like it's doing so far in Goddard.
But I don't think the spark would have been there unless the choir had been as good as it was. If he had a bunch of people that couldn't sing well.
You're probably right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I will tell you this. I'll give you this little insight. The company is called Vital, and the whole thing is around the premise of you're vital. You're absolutely important, essential, and treasured. And we have motivational messages on our bottles, and we believe that it is our duty as God's children to love everybody. And so whether or not they were talented or he brought it out in them, Goddard's default is to see the best in everybody. So the story that is told is everybody had this amazing ability and talent to them, but the real meaning is like we all have those talents. So whether or not they really are talented, we'll never know. But in the story, they are very much talented, and Goddard sees that in them and wants to draw it out of them. So it lends to exactly what we're doing here with you guys is that we all have a story, we all have talents, we all have a life, and what we're trying to do with all this is draw it out of you and get it down on paper and to preserve it for generations to come. So you're absolutely right that they are talented, but Goddard sees the best in people. And I think that's what has led Goddard to his success over life, is that if you think about the life of a maestro stands in front of, could be 100 individuals every night, each of them with an instrument and a talent. And it's a maestro's job to pull that talent out of them. And pull it out of them at the right time to where when he calls on them, together they create a beautiful concerto. If you think about it, a maestro doesn't have the opportunity to stand in front of 100 people and go, I don't think you guys are that important. We're going to do this concert with just the string section tonight. Right? A maestro is put in a situation where he has to see and find and pull the best out of everybody every night so that they put on this beautiful concert. So I believe that a maestro in life is somebody that can get the best out of everybody. So, yeah, that's why, you know, he sees the best in them, and he's going to pull the best out of them. So hopefully they can pull it off. I guess we'll see in the remaining chapters, but great observation. What else? Any other things you read? Any questions about why a character did whatever they did, or why?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to write between the first time you put pen to paper or hands to typewriter, and it actually came out looking like this? How long was that?
So we started the process in October.
So I was gonna say September, October of 21. Does that sound right?
And then it launched in September. Well, it was done August, July of the following year.
Yeah.
So probably, what is it, 8 months?
And then it launched
8, 9.
September of last year.
Yeah.
And also, did you have to pay to have it done, or did they pay you?
No, we had to pay to have that done. Yeah. So we paid for the we paid the
Publication.
the publication of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Mark Victor Hansen, they helped us to write it. So they made corrections for us.
They did a little edit too.
They
Yeah.
they did a lot of editing. We would write, and then we'd get those pages back, and they mark it up in red. And I'm like, how many pens did they use on this?
You're doing your best.
So we learned a lot through that process. I learned I hate the color red, and so yeah. Then we paid for them to publish it, to publish it, and to do all the. Or they did all the artwork and everything.
And also then what the other question originally, but I had another one too, is so how long do you remember was from start to finish?
I think it was like 8 months.
8-9 months
Okay,
total.
that's-
Yeah.
And also, do you mind sharing how much it costs for you all to do this, to ask them to publish it?
Well, this was a unique one because we're part of this Savannah Valley series. But I think this thing cost us like somewhere around $30,000.
Wow.
That's what I was wondering,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Now they don't to get a book published doesn't typically cost anywhere near that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I know somebody who's done that, that's why I'm.
Yeah.
It was to be part of the series that was with those kind of people that we, to be a part of something that wasn't, so the goal, like when people read someone else's book, like Ruby or something like that, they would essentially pick up another one in the series, so.
Yeah.
But now that you're in Amazon, with Amazon, how often do you get a feedback that someone's reading your book?
We don't really know. Amazon doesn't share any information back with us. They
You don't
just
get royalties?
we do get royalties, but they don't share like what they just share how many books were sold, and then our little portion of what that is, because Amazon keeps it all. But if they buy it directly through us and our website, there's where we get the real feedback. Or if they buy it through the Mark Victor Hansen Library.
There are reviews on Amazon, so there's
Yeah.
people that we don't know that have purchased the book and reviewed it, just so
Yeah.
far they like it, so that's good.
But yeah, every quarter we get a royalty check for the sales from, and they actually go back through the Mark Victor Hansen Library. They track all that stuff for us. So any and all sales we get through Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, or any of them come back, and then we get a check quarterly from them.
Good questions.
We're hopeful soon to break even.
Yeah. That was also, so what was the original run? Do you know how many they printed originally?
So Amazon is a different beast in its own. When somebody orders a book, Amazon actually does the printing and everything. They do
They do
like
a lot.
they do it all and ship it out. So you didn't through all the outlets they did. You don't have to pre-buy it. We didn't have to like say, okay, we're gonna do 10,000 books. We bought a bunch of our own books to hand out and stuff like this,
yeah.
but you didn't have to commit to any kind of quantity.
Number, which was nice.
Yeah.
You mentioned a Savannah Valley series. There's other stories about this home?
Yeah, that community, yes.
They're
It's,
all in the book.
Yes, it's absolutely fascinating, and that we put them in here too. So in the back here, that there's all 6 books, and we did hear there's 2 more coming. And we'll get into these towards the end here, but because we're still hopeful, we haven't heard back from Mark yet. I missed his call yesterday, but hopefully Mark will be here or Zoom in on the 25th, so you get a chance to meet him. But if not, we probably have one of the other authors. His name's Randall Kenneth Jones. He wrote Ruby. That would love to speak to all of you as well about his experience in writing. But yeah, each one of these books takes place in Savannah Valley, so all 6 of these do. And it's a different story with different characters, but there's crossovers. Like Goddard shows up I know he's in Nightingale.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if he's I don't know if he's in Love After. But yeah, each one of these. So Rich Widows is the book that Mitzi Perdue wrote. So Rich Widows is a story about how Savannah Valley came about. So that's a good one to read. Yeah, that one's a fun one to read because, well, I won't spoil it for you. It's about how Savannah Valley came about. Nightingale, Tony Lopes, he's a friend of ours that we've gotten to know through this process. His is about his passion to take care of his mom. And so he's a big real estate guy. And so it's about his dad passing and him taking care of his mom. So she moves to Savannah Valley, but she doesn't feel like she really fits into the whole Savannah Valley thing. But through the community, the people she meets, she really gets involved and falls in love with Savannah Valley. And then Ruby, probably the one we'll suggest you read next is Ruby, just because we're going to start to get into the Christmas season. So it's a Christmas book. And that one is a whole lot of fun to read. Again, I love our book, but I would read Ruby over and over and over. I think it is just a fantastic book that Randall Kenneth Jones wrote. So, and a very fun Christmas book.
So you didn't have to design the dining room and all
Correct.
this stuff, it was all there for you to just move into?
Yes, correct, yes. So that was the thing that took the longest, was that we would write the pages and then, like for instance, with the chapters we just read, we talked about pizza and getting pizza, and Mark Victor Hansen and his team all said, okay, well we're gonna create a pizzeria for the Savannah Valley folks outside of Savannah Valley in Savannah, Georgia. So they went and creatively created this restaurant with this restaurateur and stuff. And so in other books, other characters would also go to this pizzeria. Yeah. As a matter of fact, and then we'll move on. I know, I'm gonna run us over, aren't I? Yep. It's the chorale. The choir started out as just playing in a tiny basement in Savannah Valley, but then when they were writing some of the other stories, there was crossovers enough to where the Mark Victor Hansen team said, you know what, let's go ahead and build a whole auditorium for this. Yeah. So they said, because they came back to us and said, hey, we're going to change some of the things. You're not going to be performing in the basement anymore. We're going to build an auditorium for you, because we also, in one of the books, there's an art curator that retires to Savannah Valley, and they're like, we're going to double that as an art museum. And I'm like, okay, great. It was fascinating to watch them work into creating the Savannah
And put
Valley.
the puzzle together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good questions.
Yeah, love it.
So we should go on with the writing.
Yeah,
Okay.
all right, so yeah, we'll move on to,
The writing part. So I know last week we kind of talked about details, right? That was kind of the main focus of last week, was to get the details into your story. We kind of shifted based on the chapters that we just read. The emphasis now with those details is connecting the characters to your story. So you have the people that you want to write about, your sisters, your coworkers, your family, your, siblings, whomever, but to connect them with what are they doing? What do you want to tell people? What do you want to tell future generations about them? Whether them personally or like on this discussion, what activities you did with them, to kind of just to share with others. And so a couple of the prompts that we have are like, what activities did you like to do? So that could be something you could write about, because activities that we did are very different than what future generations will do, right? Like when we first started dating, for example, his brother is one of our good, like you're super close with your brother. On Friday nights we had, like a jogger, we called them swishy pant nights. And so we would have like we'd all wear our joggers and we'd play board games. And we played spades, we played games so late at night, and that's what we did. And so writing a story just about activities, that was before any of us had kids, that could be something you could share. Just a simple activity, because who knows, 10, 20, 30 years from now, board games might be like, what are you talking? Who played board games on a Friday night? That's what we did. So that's another example of something that you could write about. Going dancing, different coffee places you would go, sitting and drinking tea. My grandma always drank tea and put milk in it. I don't know anybody else that puts milk. Okay, well I do, because that's how I was taught to drink tea, was to put a splash of milk in it. And so that's something you could share. That's something I would love, haven't yet, but would love to write about with my grandma, because every time I order tea, I'm like, can I get some milk? And people look at me, I'm like, well, that's how my grandma taught me to drink it. So little things like that can be shared in a story. Once you have your characters and the connection about what you want to tell people, we tend to kind of call that the climax. What is the important thing? What is the aha moment, as what we talked in English class, of your story? What is the main thing that you want people to take away from your story? It essentially, like I was talking about, puts all those puzzle pieces together. The details, the setting, the characters, the environment, what you're doing, everything. We tend to say wrap it up in a pretty bow so it's there, okay? It doesn't have, climaxes of movies, it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be, oh, they killed the bad guy, or, the big things that you see in movies. It can be very simple, of just going to lunch with my grandma and her ordering tea with milk and her telling me that that's how her mom used to drink it. And then her mom taught her mom, and that's how she passed it on to me. It can be as simple as that, or it could be as big as something large in an event that you want to write about. So in the next part of Maestro, you will see the climax of our story. Okay, we kind of alluded to it a little bit. You guys kind of talked about that. Goddard is not done yet. He's kind of, you can kind of see his passion is starting to come. Usually that climax you can kind of predict, right? That makes a good book, a good movie, is when you kind of know what that next page is gonna be like. So.
Yeah. So so for instance, in the fiction format that like we wrote our book in, this is when your character reveals their intended outcome. It's okay to telegraph this event. Not all climaxes are surprises, as Stacie was saying. Some can be a celebration of what the readers were hoping the outcome would be. For instance, in Maestro, it's safe to say you can anticipate the climax that's coming. The example that we gave here is Mary. Goddard said, "I am asking for your permission to bring this show to life. If you say yes, then I need to know that the rest of you are committed to making this one heck of a show for the residents and their families." So that's leading up to the climax in our fictional story. In an autobiography or a memoir format, like all of us are writing, this is the opportunity to explain to your readers the feelings you were experiencing at the height of your story. The more details you share, the more powerful your climax will be. So for an example, December 23rd, 2017, after a year of agonizing hopelessness, trying to save the company I worked so hard to build, I was left with no choice but to sell it or lose everything. On a colder than usual day, I entered the room to sign the documents that would bring 23 years of hard work and dedication to an end. I remember it feeling like I was burying my best friend. The loss I felt was overwhelming. I wasn't ready to say goodbye. The day that followed seemed empty and meaningless. I had lost my purpose. So that is for me, in the story I personally am writing, that Maestro's based on, that was the climax, was that day that I signed away everything I had worked for, and the next day of losing my purpose.
Any questions with that?
Do you feel you're finished writing your life story?
No, not at all. And I think, God is doing some amazing things. Even today, we had an amazing meeting with a group of people. No, and I'm happy to say that I personally have already started working on the next book of Maestro's story. She's not so much on board yet. She will be. But it features more of Maureen's story, more of her story. And so I can't tell you. We'll talk about that in the last week, because then you'll have read the whole book, so I don't spoil anything for you. But no, there's a lot more writing to be done. We have 2 more books just on Maestro alone within the Savannah Valley series that we want to do, and then personally, I think that my story is still being written.
We feel ours, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah,
I think as long as
absolutely.
you're alive, there's no.
Very much so. Very much so.
It's just different seasons, right? That's kind of how we describe it. Like, when you're first, here, when you're first, like me as a mom, when my daughter was little, that's all I did was take care. And all of a sudden she's 11, almost 11 in a couple weeks. Doesn't want to, it's a different phase of parenting, and it was almost a loss at that point. And now you're like, okay, now I got my feet, I kind of got my groove. Now I'm just her chauffeur to and from everywhere she wants to go till, 9 o'clock at night. But then it's different. And then you move on to like our stepdaughter, my stepdaughter. Now she's 29 and called me today, and I just sat on the phone with her for an hour because she wanted to talk about work. And I'm like, okay, this is the new phase of parenting an adult, is talking about, different phases of parenting. So that's kind of how we interpret Maestro and your stories. It's different phases of life. And as long as you can share those phases to others. Because I thought when my daughter didn't want to hang out with me, my little one, I was like, well, I don't even need to be around anymore. But then you start to get your feet wet again. So that's important. That's the story I'd like to share.
Yeah. So when you're writing your stories, the climax, now mind you, the climax is not the end. So keep that in mind. You think of maybe when you watch a movie or you read a book or whatever, when you hit that, you think of the climax as, oh, that's the end. Nope. We still have 1 more week to go. So before we get into the weeks, the final week. But so think when you're writing, your climax is just everything that you've written so far up to a certain point. It's the big reveal.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Bless you. All right, so under the where do we start? So so as you read chapters, what are we doing?
9 and 10.
9 and 10. Think about what is the big event in your story, the aha moment. So think about everything you've written thus far. It's now time to reveal to your readers the why behind your story. Again, it's okay to telegraph this event. Not all climaxes are surprises, so don't think you have to have some kind of big surprise in your story. And again, just remember that it's not the end. So some tips is think about your favorite book or movie and think of the details that went into the climax of that story. Without the details, it would have been a rather boring movie or read. So think about the details leading up to. So if we go back to my example, I didn't just write December 23rd, 2017, I signed away my business that I worked so hard for, the end. There was a lot of details I put in that one paragraph, right? It was after a year of agonizing hopelessness. I'm telling my readers how I was feeling, what I was doing. You see that?
You got it.
You got it there?
I don't know. I'm on a page that finally says, what is a climax to one of your stories?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so
That
go
was
back.
the key word.
Yep. So go,
Because the pages aren't numbered, right?
yeah, I
No, we
know.
learned
We
that.
fixed that in the next one.
Here, find it. Sure.
Here we go.
Okay.
Oh,
I
nope,
think you
nope,
got it.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
You're on week 5.
He's right here.
In 4, yeah.
5.
4, 5.
There we go.
Yeah, 4, 5.
Do you have it? Do you have it?
Yeah, next page.
Lost it.
I think.
I can't.
Yes, yeah, we're talking about that.
I had it, but I don't know anything else.
Yep, right there.
I never read this.
There we go.
I read the book. Thank you.
All right. So the climax, for my particular story, the climax was December 23rd, 2017, when I signed the deal to sell everything, where I more or less lost my purpose in life. But instead, you'll see that I added a bunch of details just in this one paragraph, right? After a year of agonizing hopelessness trying to save the company I worked so hard to build, I was left with no choice but to sell or lose everything. I could have stopped there. But instead I go on a colder than usual day, I entered the room to sign the documents that would bring 23 years of hard work and dedication to an end. I could have stopped there. But I really want my readers, I want my grandkids, I want my great-grandkids to understand what was going on in my life at that point in time, what I was feeling, because I believe these next few sentences hopefully will help them to not only just understand what I was going through, but they're going to go through this same stuff, right? They're going to have these same feelings, and looking back going, okay, it's okay to be feeling the way I'm feeling right now. But I remember it feeling like I was burying my best friend. The loss I felt was overwhelming. I wasn't ready to say goodbye. The days that followed seemed empty and meaningless. I had lost my purpose. So again, you can see the amount of details that I put into that, and we keep stressing this over and over. I promise you, the more detail you put into your stories, the more your future readers are really going to connect. Your future family, whoever it is really going to connect with what was going on with you at that time.
Because the next one, if you know, that, like December 23rd, when he says the day follows seem empty and meaningless. Well, the next 2 days are Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, right? So as a reader, you're kind of like, oh gosh, what did that look like? What did that Christmas of 2017 look like? And so that's the next part of what you've written is the emptiness you felt on those days. So that's where those little details of dates or weather or just things like that make that reader kind of think, okay, there's something that is going to happen or some more detail that we're going to want based on these details. That you could have just said sometime in December, right? And you were like, great, but putting that exact date in there makes you kind of go, okay, I want to know what else happened in that story.
Yeah, and as I do write my own personal story, this is a very key, and obviously I included this in there for that reason. This is a very key part of my life and my story, because when my daughters read this, my youngest won't understand it, though she does not remember December 23rd of 2017, but my oldest probably does, and she's probably going to be sitting there going, gosh, he never let nobody know, right? I mean, I just had to act like there was nothing going on. It was Christmas, and it was Christmas morning. And inside, I was dying. I was devastated. I didn't know what was next for me in life. But I was smiling from ear to ear as we sat in front of the fireplace and opened the Christmas presents and, you know, went through the Christmas service and just, I remember sitting in church, on that Christmas service, and what was supposed to be such an amazing time of the year where we're celebrating the birth of our Savior, I'm sitting there screaming inside, why, God, why? And so I will write about all that as well, because it's those details that I want my future, future kids to, grandkid and everything to go, wow, what, I feel that same way. Grandpa lived, great-grandpa lived, great-great-grandpa, he lived through it and went on and did other things. So, anyway, we're gonna keep pounding into you, details. Make sure you write the details out. Those are extremely important especially when creating the climax of your story.
And another tip we've kind of talked about all these, but the main thing I want you guys to think about when you're writing is just keep thinking in your head why I think this is important. What is that main thing you want your readers to take away from, right? Like, why is this important? How did this change me? How did this impact me? How did this make me a better person? Or it could have made me not a better person. It always doesn't have to be a happy ending, but it's something you're sharing. Why I think this is important. Because when you start to struggle, that is the best thing that it'll always circle back and it'll make those details come back out when you start thinking about that.
All right. What questions do you have? You think that you can start to write about the climax of the individual story that you might be writing or thinking about writing?
Yeah, thinking about it. I know you all have a story. Yeah.
I've got one right here I can't wait to read.
I have one.
So do you mind if I use an example here?
No.
Sure? Okay. So, we talked last week about connecting characters, and so I can tell just by this first page I've read that I could probably, just by adding in some details, turn this 29 pages into probably 60 or more pages, doubling the size of this. And she did a great job of putting in details. So for instance, just real quick, we talked about last week about connecting characters to your story. So at one point she says in here, let's see, we started the day at 6:30 a.m., dressed, put a few last minute items into our bags, had coffee, and then put the house into shutdown mode. That's a great sentence. A lot of description there of what she did. But just some little more details can really just bring this out. So we started the day at 6:30 a.m. Dressed in our Sunday best. Dressed in what, just a little description of what you got dressed in there. Put a few last minute items in our bags. Had coffee with just a touch of cream, right? How did you take your coffee? How did
Black.
Hey, I love it. Then had a nice strong black cup of coffee, right? Then put our house into shutdown mode. As a reader, I'm like, what is shutdown mode? I'm curious. Like, I really want to know what does that mean?
We know what it means, what we don't know is why.
No, in generations from now, they wouldn't know what shutdown.
Right. What does shutdown mode mean?
Lock down the computer, put all the locks in his desk, put the thermostat down, shut off the ice maker.
See, they wouldn't know for generations from now.
So what's great, what's beautiful is we said, instead if we put the house in a shutdown mode, our final task was to walk the house and put it in shutdown mode. And then we turned the ice maker off, we turned the thermostat down. So, because future generations are gonna look at this and go, they used to walk around and do all that. We do it all through apps. I literally just hit one button now and it shuts my whole house down. But they used to walk around and do every little thing that I do with the push of a button. That's fascinating. So here, at 8:15 a.m., our neighbor Jennifer came to take us to the airport. We had an easy check-in with the electronic ticket supplied by American Express. So see how we didn't, if you were to connect Jennifer back to your story and back to you, say, you know, at 8:15, our neighbor, Jennifer, who lived across the street and was a dear, dear friend for 24 years, came by, you know, so just a little more detail about who is Jennifer, because as a reader, I'm sitting here going, well, was Jennifer important to grandma or great grandma, or who was Jennifer? So.
She was, new neighbors. They were second owners of the house across from us, and much younger than we were. And I guess the most dramatic point of Jennifer and myself was they came over one night and they said, we've tried and tried to have a baby, and now we've just gone to this doctor that's going to do the shots for Jennifer. And he said, I can't do it. I just can't. Would you? Yeah.
Okay.
Twice a day for 6 weeks.
Wow.
She came to your house and you did that?
I went over to her house.
Huh.
And I've never put an injection in myself. And she says, well, I've got sort of 2 birthmarks here, or tiny marks, and she said, aim towards the middle of them. I did.
So you could see how we took I've only read 3 sentences of the beginning of 29 pages, and we could have already added at least 2 or 3 more paragraphs to this. That's just how easy it is to write a very detailed story
Well,
about a trip.
30 days in Africa.
Yes, so the 30 days in Africa is what the story's all about. So obviously we probably wouldn't want to get into Jennifer and her shots and stuff, but what I would do is suggest that you write Jennifer down. Remember how we had characters and settings? And I would absolutely tell that story of Jennifer and your neighbor, because what that shows is it shows the care and compassion you had for your neighbors, which I think is a great lesson to pass along to the next generation, is love one another, right? Care for one another. You've never given a shot to yourself or much as anybody else, but you're willing to do this for somebody else. I promise you that that will be a great and fascinating story for future generations to read.
The shots were to prepare her body, and then they used donors' eggs, and then it produced a baby, and the baby's now somewhere in her early 20s.
Wow.
And do you think they'll be doing that 50 years from now?
Who knows?
Right? Exactly. We have no idea what they're going to be doing 50 years from now. I don't even know what they're going to be doing 50 days from now. But
No, I take that back. It was their second child. They adopted first, and then the second one was a little boy.
yeah.
Cool story.
So.
Yeah.
So details. I love this. I can't wait to read this. But yeah, we can't stress enough that you all have so many stories to tell. And what we're trying to do with this is just trying to teach you just how to write these stories. And once you write the first one, trust me, the second one is super easy. And the third one gets even easier. And the 5th one is very long, because then you're just like, I got this. And you just keep going and going and going. Great. Any other questions?
That's what I got out of the book, was all the details.
Yeah.
That did make it much more interesting than just a couple sentences.
Yeah.
It's,
how you described everybody in detail.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting out of that.
Good, I love it, good, because that's what we hope you do with yours, details.
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
I gotta put the glasses back on so I can. You said it's okay to telegraph this event. What does telegraph mean?
Well, what we don't want you to do is think that that the climax has to be some big surprise. The climax is just where your story's going, so we've telegraphed, or you kind of know, I mean, I'm not ruining the book here, you kind of, by what you've read so far, you kind of know where this is going, right? I mean, that it's okay for your reader. I guess what we want to illustrate is that you don't have to have a big wow moment. The climax, as Stacie was just showing, illustrating earlier, is it's just the peak of the story, and then there's going to be a little winding down of the story. So it's okay if your readers see it coming. It does not have to be one of these books or movies where you're like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. Where did that twist come from? Don't think of it having to have a big twist or a big reveal. The climax of your story is just the arc, is just the point where, okay, now I see where you were going with this. What happens afterwards we'll get into in the next couple of weeks.
Telegraph, like if you're gonna tell a story about a 50th anniversary trip, like we kind of, that's telegraphing it. You're gonna say what you did on day 1, day 2, day 29. Sequential order is almost the same thing as telegraph. It's okay to have a story in sequential order because it did happen from beginning, middle to end is the best way.
Does that help? Does that make sense? Not really?
Possibly. I'm gonna ponder it.
Well, climax is a very strong word, so we just didn't want you to think, oh, well, my story doesn't have a climax. You know, it does. It's whatever you were, the reason you were telling the story, that's why Stacie said that to revisit why you think the story is important. When you reach that point of what the story was all about, why you were giving all these details, here, let me see if I can better show you.
Well, I get the climax part. I just don't
Okay.
get the telegraph part.
Oh, okay, so.
And I think what I heard her say is, it's okay if everybody can see where it's going.
Yes.
It doesn't matter.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes.
So I did get it, okay.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's what
yes,
it means.
that's
Yeah.
exactly.
It doesn't even be like, whoa, that came out of left field. It can be like, oh yeah, I kind of anticipated that happening.
Yeah,
Yeah, good question.
great question.
I didn't get this many questions when I was an English teacher. I kind of like this. I mean, you guys are awake and listening.
I was thinking that I would like to do a biography instead of an autobiography of my parents, because they have an interesting story to tell.
Yes.
And so I'm trying to decide how to approach that.
Well, I will let the language arts major genius.
So you're going to tell a story based on the stuff you know, right? Like the stories you've been told.
That I've been told.
That you've been told. Is there a specific part of their story that you want to share, or just their life in general?
Specific parts of their life.
Of their life.
Yeah.
Okay. So, like we've said with the autobiography, you can take bits and pieces from, is it childhood or adolescence or adulthood that you really want to focus on?
I think their early life, because they were both immigrants.
Okay.
And, you know, their beginning was so different than the way we live over here.
Sure.
That I thought it would be interesting for my progeny to know that.
I agree. I think that's a great story. So you could, that would be the basis of it, is them. But you could also, the neat thing about doing the biography like that is you can bake in a little bit of history in there, meaning like the history of where were they from? Italy. So you can do a little bit of history, so then your readers are gonna understand a little bit more in detail where they came from because you're writing their story. You don't have to just have their experience moving over. You can have the history of a Italian immigrant coming over with their story as the focal point of it. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing is you could still follow this exact same format. So you'll still you'll start out by writing down the characters, right? So you're gonna make a list of the characters. So first and foremost, obviously, your parents. but then who else did they mention?
And their parents,
And their
right?
parents, right? So same philosophy, you just start writing down characters. Then you write down settings. Well, where did it take place? Okay, the house you grew up in, right? Or, so, and you just follow the same thing, except for, instead of writing about yourself, you're gonna write about them. So this process still holds true to
Yeah.
that, yeah, still works to that, yeah.
With baking in a little bit more, the details could be the history of the Italian immigrants coming over at that time period.
Yep, yeah, and then,
Rather than using I, you use their names.
yep.
That's a great story, because people won't really, that'll be,
It's an interesting
Yeah.
story, it's so different than our lives.
right.
Yeah, so again, once you've done the characters and the settings, then if you went to this, like we discovered in week 2, like the example we gave, where you would write the event that you want to write about. So you might write the day they came to America. And then just jot down some details. What do you remember them telling you about? Was it a boat ride? Was it cold? Was it, and you start writing down, you're not writing the story yet, you're just writing down things you remember.
Yeah.
Yep.
Then put it together.
And then when you come back and that's when you start filling in with all the details, and all of a sudden it's like, holy cow, I just wrote a story. So it's really just about what event you want to write about, just take notes of details, and then come back to
Put it together.
and start adding details. Like for instance, the example we gave here was the day the day I learned I could lose everything I ever worked for. I remember it was fall of 2016. It was unusually warm. I was on a conference call. But then when I want to write the story, I'm going to go back to it and go, fall of 2016, it was unusually warm, but I remember the colors of the trees had already turned, right? I mean, so you just add in those details to every little thing I did, and all of a sudden now you have a story. So same process. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Awesome. Okay.
Oh, thanks. You guys got busy. You know what's next? 3 o'clock?
Here last week.
Another,
Oh, you mean,
yeah, what's your day today?
Oh. We're turning in our.
We
You have an
don't-
hour?